All right, this is Andy McNeill. This is another edition of Free Arkansas, and I'm here today with Brent Montgomery, candidate for House Seat District 52. Brent, how you doing?
Good, sir. How are you, Andy?
I'm doing just great. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us today.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you having me.
You know, I know a little bit about you. I know that you're a justice of peace in Yell County, I think in your second term.
Yes, sir.
You know, I know that you're a small business owner, you know, a volunteer firefighter. But tell me more, but I don't know the whole story. Can you give me the little background?
Yeah. So, yes, I grew up here in Yell County. I've lived here my whole life. I absolutely love Yell County, and I'm married, been married 15 years to my wife, Kendra. We have 3 kids, all ages from 13 to 5. So I tell people there's never a dull moment at our house with sports and all that stuff. We live in Danville, up on top of Danville Mountain. And yes, I'm a firefighter, justice of the peace. We have a construction business in Plainview called EnviroTrack. We employ about 30 people. We go around and do work for RDOT and, other contractors all across the state of Arkansas, do hydro seeding, straw blowing, some dirt work. I've got dump trucks and stuff like that as well. So,
got it. Did you start that business, or do you have a partner in it?
I did. Me and Kendra, my wife, started this business 14 years ago on our own. So, and
excellent.
For the first couple of years, it was me and whatever temp I could go get from the temp agency, and we go do jobs on our own. And through the grace of God, we've grown that thing now. Like I said, we got about 30 employees now. So we started from nothing. I had quit. I was working in the oil and gas industry, traveling and working. And the company that I was working for wanted to move me down to Laredo, Texas, full time. I'd been working for them for several years, and they wanted me to take over part of the business down there, run a crew down there. And we had just found out that we were pregnant with our first son.
Oh, yeah?
And I did not want to raise a family down in Laredo. It's pretty rough down there. So anyway, I decided to quit that job, move home, was going to go to work for another outfit in the oil and gas industry. And a buddy of mine that does some work for RDOT as a contractor, he said, man, why don't you start your own business doing that kind of stuff and do some work for RDOT and other places. And that kind of sparked the idea. And for, like I said, the first year or two, it's kind of hit or miss trying to get off the ground. I was taking some temporary jobs in between for a landscaper and stuff, just trying to fill the void. And anyway, we ended up getting it off the ground and running. But yes, 2 or 3 weeks into this, I invested every dime I had, put our house up, everything to try this, no business experience at all. And found out we had our baby, our first kid on the way. And I looked at our account, I had $9 in there, and I thought I had failed my family. I thought I'd really screwed up. But like I said, through the grace of God, He's been great to us. We made it through. And like I said, now we have a successful business that creates a lot of jobs here in Yell County.
Well, so you know what it's like to, worry about payroll.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you would agree with this or not. Like, I get like a high, I guess I would say, for, the idea of helping create jobs.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's a passion of mine. Where Plainview's at.
Of course.
We're in a town of 600 people, and we've had opportunities and people that's asked why don't we move to Russellville, closer to the interstate, and we work all across the state. So I send 7 or 8 crews out a day. Most of the time we're going to Northwest Arkansas or wherever, and that does make sense logistically to move closer to the interstate and probably a better employee pool. Honestly, more people and stuff. But there's just something that to me about creating jobs in our rural community. Honestly, that's why our small towns are drying up, is because people are moving out of them for work. So if I can create jobs right here in a town of 600, that's special to me.
Yeah. I think that one of the things, and maybe that's an analogy for the state in some ways, we don't just have a problem with people moving out of small town America. We have sometimes a problem, you might say, people moving out of Arkansas. So this is just my opinion. And I'm quite frankly really more interested in yours than mine. But, I think we're in an arms race for jobs. And, so jobs are sacrosanct. But I do know where Plainview is. My wife is from Plainview. And so she didn't go to school there. She went to school in Russellville, but she was born there and lived there for a while. Her father was the basketball coach at Plainview High School way back when. This is back like, I don't know, almost like 60 years ago. So like a long time ago. Well, and are your parents from there too?
They are. Yep. My mom and dad are both from here. Actually, my mom's from Waldron, but my dad's from here in Plainview.
Gosh, so she's just, just down the road.
Yeah.
So who is the biggest influence, when you've grown up?
Okay. So I had a few. My grandpa, which would have been my mom's dad, also lived in Waldron. He was a Pentecostal preacher my whole life. He also had a construction business. Carpentry. He built houses and stuff. And he was so special to me, just a man of wisdom. I listened to every word and clung on to every word he said. But one conversation that we had in particular, so he had a lot of heart issues when he got older, and he was the very first person in Arkansas they actually went in and put a pig's heart in him, and he ran off battery packs. So he ran off battery
Really?
packs. Yeah, his heart beat off battery packs for about 6 years. It was a testing deal they put him through, and it worked. I mean, but he just over time he just got so tired and so weary, and like I said, he was so close to God. Talked to him every day. He was ready to go home.
Yeah.
So we went to the nursing home, and basically he planned his funeral. He planned everything. He knew they were going to unplug him basically. But so I sat there that night with him, and I said, Grandpa, I said, I've not picked your brain near enough through the years. You're a smart businessman, a pastor, all that. I said, if there's one thing you could tell me before you leave, what could you tell me? And he said, son, he said, here it is. I'm at the end. 30 minutes from now, I'm going to be sitting with our Lord and Savior. He said, at the end of it, he said, I've built 100 houses in my day. He said, at the end of it, though, all you can take with you is your integrity.
Yeah.
He said, so you run a business, you're going to have jobs you're going to lose money on. You're going to have jobs you're going to make money on. He said, just remember at the end of it, all you're taking with you is your integrity. That's all you can take with you. So that's always stood with me all through every business meeting I've ever had. I've always kept that close to heart that, at the end of all this, all you've got your integrity. So he was always an inspiration to me, especially when it would come to business stuff. And my pastor now, I've been going to church here in Plainview for 26 years. Me and my pastor here, I'm on the board there. We have a really good relationship. He's always been a good mentor to me. And honestly, and I would have told you this answer 6 months ago, I would say Charlie Kirk. I've watched Charlie's videos for years. Me and a good friend of mine, we've shared Charlie's videos with each other for years. And I've just always loved his willingness to debate with people and spread the word of the gospel with people that he knew they were going to disagree with him, but he still had those tough conversations with them. And in reality, that's what we're all called to do, our sole purpose for being here, really. And so he's been an inspiration to me as well.
Well, speaking about Charlie Kirk, maybe we can use him as a little bit of an example. So like what I would probably say is, if you go down to the State House, even if everybody was a Republican, right, that you're still going to have everybody has a unique voice and a unique view. And there's so many things that you vote on that you can't possibly know everything, right? There's just no way to know that. And sometimes you have to go against the grain. Sometimes you have to take an opposing position. So, tell me how that works for you, just your, day-to-day life when, you you want to do one thing and your wife wants to do the next. How do you resolve those conflicts?
Yeah. So it's, sometimes it's resolved through tough conversations, obviously. But those conversations have to be had. There's a couple instances when me being on the quorum court here in Yale County that I've had to go against the grain. I've had to go against a few people and make decisions against people that are in my own party, so to speak. And it's a decision that I knew would upset people. But at the end of the day, you got to go by what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, and how you feel, because you got a conscience to deal with at the end of the day. But without going into too much detail, to respect their privacy, there's two different instances where I had to vote against other county officials that we worked closely with, just because I didn't believe that the actions they took were correct. And I've always believed in standing on principles that matter matter the most. So I've had to do that. I have to do that in business a lot of times with my employees, and yes, and with my wife sometimes, but it's all through conversation. At the end of the day, there's common ground to be found if you'll just have the conversation to get there most of the time. So,
is that the same way you think about collaborating? I mean, would you say like, like, are you the kind of guy that's going to go down and represent our district and, work with people well to get things done? Or is it my way, the highway? And I probably shouldn't even frame it that way. There's sometimes it's good a reason to stick to your guts, right? Like, just like we just said.
Yeah.
But oftentimes we don't know everything.
Yeah. No, you're right. And back to the going against the grain deal, you brought up Charlie on that. And I've already been 2 or 3 times, man. I've already been, bashed, I guess you could say, on Facebook or something about bringing my faith into politics. And people are saying you need to keep politics out of church and church out of politics. But I couldn't disagree with that more. And in fact, I believe that is one of the reasons our country is in the shape it's in today, is because the two have become too far separated. And just to throw a little scripture in here, Proverbs 29:2 tells us that when the righteous rule, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, the people mourn. So that tells me from the very beginning of time that God intended righteous people to be leaders, and that includes politics. So I'll always stand firm on that, and that is going against the grain, as you talked about. But as far as how to see people with a difference of opinion, how to work that stuff out, that's honestly one of my favorite things to do. I love hearing from people that's got difference in opinions, because I've always believed that until you truly put yourself in someone else's shoes, you'll never fully understand their perspective on things and why they see things that way. I could have been I could have grew up in a whole different part of the country, say California or New York City, and I'd probably have a different perspective on things. So a lot of times you just have to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to get their perspective. And the only way you can do that is by sitting down and having a conversation with them. And more times than not, there's room for common ground. But without having that conversation, you'll never get there. And that's one reason I always respected Charlie Kirk. Like I spoke about earlier, he wasn't afraid to spark those tough conversations that got people thinking and talking.
One of the ways that I think about this is sometimes it's pitted in like moral terms, right? Like I'm standing on my moral principles, and we've got these things that we're wrestling with. But the truth is that most of what goes down there is nothing like that, right? It's like, how do we spend money on a prison? How do we spend money on healthcare? How do we spend money on roads? And these things, it doesn't really divide. I'm a Republican. We agree the same way. It may divide like, what do I think makes sense building? What do I think is going to have the right investment? So just to tease some of this stuff up, if you go down there, and you probably know some of this stuff, Arkansas's budget is a little over $6 billion a year. And, that's really not that big if you were going to compare it to a lot of other things, right? And so sometimes I use Walmart as an example here, because Walmart is $600 billion in revenue. So a factor of 100 times bigger than the whole state of Arkansas. And you probably know these things too, but the main thing we spend money on is really like 3 or 4 areas. So it's public education, which is a $2.5 billion, Medicare, which is also over $2 billion, higher education, which is a little less than $1 billion, prisons, which are about $500 million, and then state employees of $100 million, and then everything else is sort of rounding errors. So, oftentimes I would say that the things that you're going to go down there are going to be wrestling with lots of things, sure, but at the end of the day, here's the budget we got to work with. Maybe let me back up and come at this a slightly different way. I was going to frame up what I think is, I said earlier it's an arms race for jobs. I was going to frame up where I think, what are the higher goals for the state, so to speak. But let's just start with this. If you were doing like statistics, how would you frame up the people in District 52?
Well, I would say they're all good, hardworking people.
Right.
I think the issue with District 52, if you want to know what I think the biggest issue is that we're facing District 52, is economic development. I think that's a huge issue here, and that's kind of what you were talking about. There's not enough jobs here, and in all honesty, if my kids and my grandkids and your kids and your grandkids want to live here and they want to raise a family here, they should have the opportunity to do that. They shouldn't have to move off to get a good education. They shouldn't have to move off to get a good paying job. They should be able to stay here and support their kids here. So economic development's a lot of that. And there's a lot of things that branch off of that, roads, transportation, budgeting, everything else, and it's not just a District 52 issue like you spoke about earlier. It's an Arkansas issue, but in my district, it's cows, chickens, and trees. I mean, almost everybody here is touched by that industry somehow or another. Chicken growers, chicken plants, loggers, logging mills, cattle farms, stuff like that. So
Yep.
we got to protect those industries for sure, and then try to create other jobs.
And just using Yell County as an example, Yell County's GDP is about 820 million. And I don't have the information in front of me, but a good chunk of that is ag, broadly speaking, what
Absolutely.
you just said.
Yeah.
And even however, for the state of Arkansas, it's a big number too for the state of Arkansas. Well, and even look, let's just use like I was going to lay out some other issues, not quite as much of an issue in Yell County, but everybody who's row cropping farming this year, you're going to lose money.
Absolutely.
So if you're a rice farmer, you're going to lose up on a per acre basis, corn, soybeans, cotton, you're going to lose money. Now, cattle has been a good year, but that's an interesting thing because, sometimes it shouldn't really be as political as it is, but and we don't give out the subsidies at the state level anyway, but it's a federal level, but it's a thing, right? Like, what are we going to do to help these industries?
Right.
I would say some of the other issues that we have is a little less than 50% of the people in Yell County, and this would probably be true for the whole district, are on Medicaid or Medicare. Now, it's probably like in the low 40s, but that's a substantial amount of people. And I think even if I was to use like Dardanelle Schools as a proxy, I think in the elementary school, it is a majority of people that are on the assistant lunch program. So there's a lot of people out there, that need help, right?
They
and
do.
so
There's currently 1 million Arkansans that are out of work.
Yeah.
I've been at the Capitol several times since I started this. That is a hot topic at the Capitol. It's something I know they're working on. I've sat through some meetings already at the Capitol regarding this, and that's where I found that statistic was at the Capitol that right now there's 1 million Arkansans that are on the Medicaid, that are out of work. So.
Well, and if you're on Medicaid and you just got, and I'm not one side or the other, at least I'm not trying to be when I say this, but in the big beautiful bill, when they take people off Medicaid, regardless of what you think about that, people still get sick. And if they don't have health care, they're going to show up in rural hospitals, where because they're non-for-profit, they're required to help everybody that rolls in there. And that just is going to put pressure on those hospitals. So if you were to listen to like Troy Wells, who runs Baptist in this state, they would just talk about like it's just another thing that's hard for them. And it's especially hard in rural hospitals. I'm curious how you go about doing this. We live in a world where, almost regardless what the topic is, but we can just even stick with healthcare. There's a debate about what's true, right? People say, "Oh my God, I went and found this on the internet," and so do you think that like knowledge is a thing?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. I look at it. Somebody was trying to tell you what it's like to live in Plainview and start a business, and they start telling you about it, and they've never been to Plainview. You're gonna be like, "Yeah, I know you don't know about Plainview, right?" Right? Like, so it's so like I'm sure for the little hobbies that I've got, if you started talking about them, and I would be like, "Yeah, I know you don't have my view."
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about? And I'm not trying to say this in like the salacious, like cultural issues, but just think about the mundane things for a second. How do you go about understanding like how to think about what's true? Think about taxation or regulation or something like that when I'm asking this versus, some, culture war thing. How do you go about it? How do you decide what to like? Should we take fluoride out of the water? Things like that.
Right. Yeah. So obviously you got to find experts in that field. You've got to pick people's brain, like you said, that's been there and done that. Unfortunately, as far as news channels go and stuff, it's no secret I'm running as a Republican, I'm conservative, so I lean toward Fox News more than I do the others. But even with Fox News, you have to be very careful what you watch and look at nowadays. And now that AI is out there, it's such a scary thing. You can be watching something with your own eyes and not even know if it's true or not anymore. So you have to find experts in that field. And that's what I've been doing on all the stuff that's come across my desk, so to speak, in this district. I call Mary Bentley, was calling Gary Stubblefield, some other Terry Rice, some other representatives and senators in there, and ask them what their perspective is on this. I think you just got to get a hold of people that's been there, done that, like you said, and that you can trust to give you an honest answer. You can do some of your own research, but you never know if what you're reading on Google is again, you never know what to believe anymore, and it's a sad thing. But
yeah, it's funny. You're right. I think AI tools are unbelievable. I use them all the time. This morning I had a little device that had a short in it. And I literally took a picture of the device, threw it up in ChatGPT, and said, "How do I fix this?" And it literally named this the serial number of what I had, and they gave me the complete instructions, which worked. And
it's awesome. Awesome technology.
Awesome. We're only going to use more, not less. But what's interesting is sometimes I'll do it where the other day I teach a class at the University of Arkansas, and I was we were doing the book, and I wanted a breakdown of a chapter, and I went and said, "Hey, can you outline the chapter?" And when I saw the chapter, because I had read the book, I was like, "Yeah, this is the wrong book." And so and so I brought it up to students and said, "Well, I hope you chat GPT the right book, because if you don't, you're going to get the wrong stuff today."
Yeah.
So okay, so you're justice of the peace. How did you decide you want to run?
Man, well, I serve on several boards here in the county. I serve on the Yale County Fair Board, the Pee Wee Basketball Committee, the board of directors at our church. And again, being a business owner, obviously I care about our community, creating jobs here, got deep roots here. And it was just a way to help our county out. I'm on fire department. I've been on the fire department 20 years. And so we deal with the county quite a bit from that perspective. I'm a training officer there. And I'm also our secretary. I keep up with all of our books and our finances and stuff for the fire department. So I dealt with the county from that aspect of it. And just another way I thought I could get on there and help our county out. And we have. I'm very proud of the things we've done. Not just me, but when I got on the court, there's 11 people in our quorum court. When I was elected on, there was 7 new members elected on. And I'm very proud of a lot of the work that we've done since I've been on there. But it's just a calling to serve, really.
Yeah. Well, that's excellent. Okay. We talked a little bit about business development, as you said, sort of the biggest issue. And I quite frankly, I really agree with you in this sense. I think that, like I said, it's an arms race for jobs. And I might even argue, and I'll use this as a backdrop for my next questions. I might even argue that, in order to facilitate, and this, it's one of the reasons I do this podcast. The reason I do this podcast is I have this view. I love Arkansas, and I love Yale County. I live there, but I don't think it's issue free. And so I look at this and I say, what would it look like if we had the most national merit scholars and not one of the fewest? What would it look like if our crime wasn't high, but it was low? What if our healthcare was one of the top and not one of the bottom quartile? And I never feel unsafe. I never feel like I don't have access to healthcare. My children were educated very well here. But nonetheless, people look at these numbers, and I just think we can aspire to more. And I look no further than look at things like, in Texas, they've got $100 billion investment going into AI at a 1,200-acre facility. And I think, wow, that's a project we would love to have here in Arkansas, right? It's so anyway, I think there's all these opportunities. So I'm curious, you weren't there to vote for it, and so it's water under the bridge, but, I'm sure you're walking around and you're talking to educators that don't like the LEARNS Act, some people that like the LEARNS Act. What do you think?
Well, I've definitely heard both sides of. I've heard both perspectives on it for sure. You're not wrong about that. I've talked to superintendents at schools, and I've talked to superintendents that are for it and superintendents that are against it. But it's a big topic everywhere we go, and I'm all for parental choice. I really do. I support the LEARNS Act because of that. So I support the the school voucher system. I think parents should be able to choose where their kids go to school. And so I agree with the school voucher system. And I think that more and more families are pulling their kids out of public schools, often because the concerns about what's being taught or what agendas are being pushed maybe onto their children. Making that move can be costly. I understand that. So I believe the funding that follows a child to public school should follow that child to whatever school or form of education that they believe in. The problem with that is then there's nothing to protect our public schools if that parent decides, well, hey, this didn't work out, I'm sending my kid back to public school. Then the public school, has to educate that kid the rest of the year with no funds from the government. I don't think that's right. I don't think this public school should be on the hook for that. But I also see the reasoning on why people are finding other forms of education, why parents are doing that. I think parents should have the choice to do what's right for their kids. They know their kids better than anybody else, and I think that's fine. And I think the funding should follow them to the private school or homeschool or whatever they want. Now, I don't believe that if a parent decides they want to homeschool their kids and they get that government funding to do so, they should be held to a standard just like a public school is. Like, hey, you're going to pass these tests, or you're not going to get your funding, and show us that you're actually educating your child properly the way you should. I've heard both sides of it, and I know this probably isn't the right answer, but I can see both sides of it.
Well, of course.
I think it was a big, complex bill. I think there was too much put into that bill, but I understand a lot of times that's how some of these bills get passed. They put a little piece of the pie in there for everybody, so to speak, so they can get it pushed through. I don't agree with the complexity of the bill. I do like that our teachers got raises. I think they deserved raises. And I think and I like the school voucher stuff, but along with that, there was some other stuff in there that some of our schools aren't happy about, and I can see that.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's a noble mission to say, let's make our education system as best we possibly can.
Yes.
And there's all sorts of tweaking. And it's never as simple as everybody thinks, right? Some kids have disabilities, and educating them is different than somebody else. Some kids come to school hungry, right? And you don't, or have other issues. And the school has sort of been this place to kind of safeguard some of them. And then of course, it's funny. I have this sort of view, Brent, that it's funny. I try to go look for where all this like what people are saying that they don't like in education, and I'll make jokes like, is it in the accounting class? Is it in the math class? And so generally, like, what upsets people is like one little thing, not like the whole thing. But I think it's a noble pursuit. Sometimes I think, though, the complexity, one of the is like you said, a challenging. And I would say that, like, one of the things that happened under Asa Hutchinson is they put in this place at higher education where they put this formula in that would say, is the college performing? Let's make it merit based, and that would set the funding. And I was on the higher education board that looked at this, and the idea is noble, right? Let's judge people on performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just so hard to come up with something that works, because at the end in Arkansas, you got 44 colleges. In some ways, it's 44 institutions spread out over the Arkansas that are creating jobs in those communities. And so those communities, those jobs are sacrosanct. It's a little bit like tech. Like, I think one of the things, like, guys like me, I would say, expect of people like you is, you're going to protect Arkansas Tech because they haven't had the fair shake in terms of revenue per student. It's completely different. When they locked in that performance, they locked in the amount per student that everybody got. And if it was mismatched, it was just mismatched, and it was now ingrained in the formula. Again, something that you didn't get to vote on, but maybe it'll come back around. Are you hearing anything about the prison? I mean, that's sort of a hot topic. Would you have been for it, against it? Or not a partisan issue, right?
No, it's not. I've heard all about it, and I've heard both sides of this. I've talked to Tim Griffin's office about it. I've heard their side of the story on it, and I've talked to people in Franklin County about it. And I'll just say this: I fully believe that our state needs a new prison due to the serious issues of overcrowding. Interstate. I mean, that's no secret. Now that the parole reform passed, that went into effect here in January, and we're going to start seeing criminals here in Arkansas serve their entirety of their sentences for the most part. while this is a positive step, obviously, toward accountability and justice, which I fully support, it also adds to the overcrowding issue that we're already seeing because criminals are going to be staying in prison for longer. The main concern I hear from the people of Franklin County is that they feel like this decision was forced upon them.
Oh yeah, of
Just like the casino in Russellville.
course.
I think a lot of people in Russellville want the casino. I think the
It-
problem with it is they felt like they didn't have a say from the get go on this. And I think Franklin County is the same way. I think if the governor's office would have kind of sold this to them like, hey, this is an opportunity for you. We're willing to give you this prison instead of saying, hey, you're going to take this prison. It's just a perspective of coming from it. I think there's 8 or 10 counties in the state of Arkansas that would jump all over this prison. I know Yale County, where I'm on the corner court, we've discussed it thoroughly, and we would have loved to have it here. But also, after talking to Tim Griffin's office, I understand the reasoning and wanting to put it where they're in Franklin County is because they're hoping to draw staff out of Fort Smith area to help staff the prison. A couple of thousand jobs. You got to be within driving distance of a pretty big municipality to staff that thing. I know, like Varner Prison and all that, they're having to bring employees in from Mississippi and stuff because there's just nobody down there to work that prison. So they're having to pay really good money to get people to come from
right.
out of state to come work down there. So they're trying to avoid that. And but again, I understand the Franklin County issue, the residents there, as well, feeling like this was forced upon them.
Yeah, I think we've got, when it comes to broadly in prison, I think we got 4 issues. One is that we have a high crime rate, and I don't think that Arkansans are more naturally criminals, right? I don't think that's the case, but like we do have a high rate. Now it comes from certain areas, so if you take those out, the statistics look a little different. And then we have a high incarceration rate. I also think that's not good. If you look at us, like the United States is high, and then we're one of the higher ones in the United States. For guys like me, I want to see violent folks in jail, but I also know how expensive it is to house people. And for other kind of crimes, this is just the world according to me. I would not be throwing everybody in jail. I'd be saying there's other things we can do because it's super expensive for us to house everybody.
Yeah, it is.
And then I think overcrowding is a thing too, and it's a tough pill to swallow to look at the budget and say, wow, it's like a couple $100,000 per bed, when the average home in Yale County is like 130. So that's the median price home, and so it sounds super expensive to everybody. Of course, it's more complex than that, And then we have a high recidivism. I never get that word right. Recidivism, it's a big thing, it seems like that things, they didn't vote on this, but maybe they won't. I find it interesting because I don't think this is maybe it's not. Maybe you think it's partisan. I don't necessarily think it is, but if they want to eliminate vaccines, are you in the camp of yeah, let's not get vaccinated?
Well, I don't think that vaccines should be ever mandated, I guess, by the government. Medical decisions should always be made by the individual, if you ask me. But, I don't think there should be a forced blanket laws or anything, or like it should be a one size fit all deal. Like, for instance, the COVID vaccine, I didn't take it. My wife didn't take it. Our kids didn't take it, but my dad did take it. And I thought that he needed to due to, he was in bad health and his immune system and stuff. So, I feel like if somebody wants to take it, they should. If they don't want to, they shouldn't be forced to. Anyway, that's why I believe in personal freedom on vaccines. So
yeah, I'm mostly very libertarian, where I like where I could just do whatever I want, and I like to think that my libertarianism spreads across everything. So for me, I would say I should be able to do other things. Buy whatever I want. It's the same reason I think if I want to ride a motorcycle, I should ride without my helmet. But 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 I always think sometimes there's hypocrisy in government where someone says, I feel that way about one thing, but if we said something else like, hey, should you be able to buy marijuana? You might say, oh my gosh, no way. There's, that's a bridge too far for me. But anyway, one of the things that did get passed down there, and there's 2 sides to this for sure, and I'll give you mine here after you give me yours. So they did vote to put the 10 Commandments, and I know faith is really important to you. Mm-hmm. And a lot of Republicans, not a lot, but definitely Republicans voted against putting this up in public spaces. What would you have done? It's super hard to vote against the Ten Commandments, right? To go back
Right.
and face everybody in your neighborhood and go like, sorry, I'm not going to vote for the Ten Commandments,
Yeah, no, I understand. And again, like you said, I'm deeply rooted in my faith. I believe that the Ten Commandments represent the foundation of how we all should live our lives. Um, but that's why I believe the Ten Commandments should be I think they should be displayed in every government building, whether that be a school, a courthouse or whatever. But this county or this country was founded on the belief of in God we trust. It's time we start living that way, I think. But now I do understand that the freedom of religion comes with the possibility of other people and other religions getting to display their beliefs as well. And legally, if we put the Ten Commandments out there, then legally they're able to do that too. They have the right to do that. But we shouldn't, I think, let the fear of what might happen prevent us from doing what I believe is right by putting the Ten Commandments out there. But, and mostly because I believe the Ten Commandments is a moral compass for all of us to follow, whether you're a Christian or not.
Yeah.
The things that the Ten Commandments, for the most part, are about is just a moral compass of how we all should live our lives. So we shouldn't kill, we shouldn't steal, we shouldn't commit adultery, those type of things. Really, Christian or not Christian, that's a moral compass to how we should live. So I think it should be. I think it should be posted in every government agency there is, because like you said, like I said, our founding fathers, they found this country on trusting God, and I think we should start living that way. But I do understand the other side of it as well. You open the door for a lot of other things. I think that's why a lot of the Republicans voted against it.
Well, I think the other reason is that, I think that one is these things are really put forth by national groups that really what they want them to be done is declared unconstitutional and moved to the Supreme Court. That's the hidden agenda, and so they're written in certain ways. And then, so that makes guys like me cynical. And then I end up saying things like, well, why not put the Constitution up everywhere? That's what really binds us together. That's not in every public building. And then I end up saying, gee whiz, I'm totally for certain stuff. And it's not an anti-10 commandment thing, but I just look at it and say, well, gee, if you can put that up somewhere, what else can be put up? Mm-hmm. And I can dream up lines that that would test my edges. I can dream up where I'd be like, yeah, I'm not for that. And so if it could be all the ways that I want it, well, then I'm totally for it. So
right.
If I could draw it up, no problem. And so, does that mean that we're going to put the Book of Mormon hanging in all the Utah, public buildings, and you're going to roll in there and be like, oh yeah, we've got to do this because this is super important? Or would you be like, that's a bridge too far, mm-hmm. So I think it opens us up. And so, but again, I know it's how are you going to go back and explain to people in Yell County you didn't vote for the Ten Commandments? That's hard, right? So
it does open the door for a lot of other issues. I do agree with that. So
here's one of I got a couple more things, and then so one of the issues that I think we're going to have over the next number of years is around the Fourth Amendment. So the Fourth Amendment is a legal search and seizure, and really that gets to privacy. They can't come take all your stuff without a warrant. Mm-hmm. And my fear on this, and I'm just curious how you think about this, is it's not the salacious stuff like you posted some picture, of some nude or something like that. To me, the problem really is that if you have an AI tools, and I'll just use an example in Iran. So the girl in Iran that took her headscarf off and then she died in jail, and they have this big protest, right? In the protest, all these women took their scarves off. Well, the Iranian government just used facial recognition to go track people down. And then they just basically, and then they've got it now where there's so many cameras there. If you're driving down the road, take your headscarf off in your car, you may get a text that says, put it right back on.
Yeah.
And that sort of control of other people. Or can you imagine if we had a social score, right? Hey, you're not nice to the barista at the Starbucks, minus 10 points. You didn't go to church, minus 10, or whatever it is. I sit there and go hey, I could look at everything on your social media and now you just don't get the job. And so I worry about this privacy and where it can go, and so how do you feel? Do you feel like that's not an issue, or do you think your stuff should be private?
I feel like it is an issue. Privacy is a fundamental right that we have as Americans. Like you said, they're doing that stuff overseas, and
Yeah.
we shouldn't deal with that in America. As a conservative, I believe in less government, obviously, and more power to the people. Our founding fathers understood that, like you mentioned, the Fourth Amendment
Yep.
that protects Americans from unwarranted surveillance, data collection, government intrusions. The Fourth Amendment protects us from all that, and so
Right.
there's no need to redo the Constitution. But a government big enough to track everything that you do is a government that's big enough to control everything that you do, like
That's
you were talking
exactly.
about a while ago.
Yeah.
And
And yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go
no,
ahead. I
you're
did
good,
that before. Sorry.
but to me, true freedom means that you have the right to live life without the government watching over your shoulder. And so I'm 100% for privacy, less government. Get that junk out of here.
Yeah, I think that I think also we didn't mention this, but the reality is all of that over the infrastructure that you need to then put all those things in place, is costly.
Oh
And I
yeah.
would like this is obviously not a state issue, but I'll just say it anyway, because it's, you and me. I look at it and say I don't want planes to get hijacked. But do we need 60,000 people at TSA every time all of us roll through and take our picture each time we go through? I
Right.
mean, I think there's like we didn't need it beforehand, and I was traveling all the time, and so I look at it and sometimes think like bad things happen, and then we overreact and we create infrastructure we don't, and then anytime you want to peel it back, you're accused of,
Mhm.
you don't want people safe or the environment's going to get hurt or whatever, and in reality, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it's just activities that need to happen. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's
We're,
my that
no, you're right. We're a knee-jerk reaction society. A lot of
that's
We
right.
are, and the government always wants to fix everything, and sometimes the government just needs to stay out of the way and let the people
That's
leave the
exactly
people
right.
alone. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's life. It's so okay. Last thing. So you're walking around. Whether you're knocking on a door, you're at some group, you're whatever it is, and you stand up to tell a little about yourself. What's the 30-second pitch?
okay, well, yeah. Again, I serve in several aspects. I'm on the quorum court. My second term on the quorum court here. I'm on the fair board, the board of directors at our church. Pee Wee basketball committee. I've been a firefighter for 20 years, but I never intended on running for state representative. Marcus Richmond is retiring. Was running this was District 52 representative, and he's retiring, so there's an open seat there. And Mary Bentley, which is the other representative out of Yale County, called me and asked me to run for this position when she knew that Marcus was retiring. And anyway, I first told her no. I said, I've got too many irons in the fire. I'm happy with all these boards I'm serving on right now. I think we got a lot of good things going. And she said, well, don't give me an answer overnight. Take a month to think about it and then let me know. It's a big decision. So we did. We prayed about it as a family for a month, thought about it for a month, and talked to my judge here in Yale County. Told him I'd have to get off the court, obviously, to do this because it's a conflict of interest. I set some of my guys down at work that's been with me over 10 years. Ask them, if this is something I decide to do, could they take on some more responsibilities and free me up to do some of this stuff? I've got a passion for it, but with so many irons in the fire that I had, I just didn't know for sure if the timing was right on it. But they encouraged me to do it. My family encouraged me to do it. The judge here encouraged me to do it. Mary Bentley encouraged me. But more than anything, I feel like it's a calling. I really feel like I'm called to serve because I came up with 1,000 reasons on why not to do this. And for some reason, everything just kept dragging me back to, hey, this is what you need to do. This is a way you can serve from a bigger platform. And so that's what I'm doing. And, I am tied in with the people of this community. I've got a business with 30 employees. I understand, making a $30,000 a week payroll, it's not easy. So I understand that. I've got a cattle farm. I've got about 35 head of cattle here. So I understand our ag industry. And I just really think I got a deep understanding for the people of this district. And I love this district. I got a lot of family roots in Scott County. And it's just a way for me to serve this district that's been so good to me. And so that's it.
Well, excellent. Well, Brent, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. Best of luck. Look forward to seeing you again out there, different events, etc. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I appreciate the opportunity, man. I've had a blast.